podcast.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and today, continuing our two-part series on our home state here of North Carolina, of 5 stories this week. Only had 4 last week, so there you go. Whatever. 5 stories this week, looking at the lives of Gerald Hege, Richard McCoy Jr., Dwight Watson, Jacklyn Lucas, and our first story will be of Topsy the Elephant.
Story time. Story time. Story time? Story time.
Now, astute listeners might be like, wait a minute, you already covered Topsy the Elephant back on episode 71. It was the elephant that got electrocuted by Thomas Edison, because Thomas Edison was actually a dick in real life. Well, no, it's crazy. Like, here's what's crazy to me. Like, I feel like Elon Musk is like our version of Thomas Edison. Like, at the end of the day, going to be responsible for a lot of huge advancements in technology and how we live our lives. But the reality is that he's like a real life supervillain. Thomas Edison was a butthole, all right? Very well documented. And he electrocuted an elephant. Now, this elephant, also named Topsy, did kind of deserve it. She like trampled people to death. Granted, it was because they pissed her off first and were treating her inhumanely. So like, who's the real winner and loser here? Either way, Thomas Edison electrocuted this elephant to death because he was trying to show that like Tesla's electrical current version or whatever was like way more dangerous than Edison's, which in reality it's actually the opposite, but whatever. All of that is to say, Topsy, apparently a pretty common name for elephants, because there was another one with a connection to North Carolina history. Thomas Edison's elephant executed in 1903, but this happened in October of 1922 when the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus arrived in Wilmington. Now, at the time, this was one of the biggest shows on the circuit and rivaled both the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey in terms of notoriety. So it's probably like number 3, maybe number 4. I don't really know what to compare it to, honestly. Like if you're into like wrestling, I don't know, it's probably like WWE, AEW, and then it's like TNA or Ring of Honor. Maybe, I don't know. There's probably some other ones out there. Those are just abbreviations I've heard. Regardless, this Hagenbeck Wallace Circus had fully recovered from a devastating train crash 4 years earlier in 1918 in Hammond, Indiana, after their circus train collided with an empty passenger train. This crash actually killed 86 performers and workers for this circus, many of whom burned alive in the subsequent fire from this crash. Nothing to do with this story, but just like a crazy thing that happened to this circus. At their site in Wilmington, the circus set up 17 tents on the corner of 13th and Ann Streets and kicked off the festivities with a large parade through town. Back when, parades were like a huge deal. And like, listen, I live in a small town now. Christmas parade, huge deal. All right. No, that's about it these days, right? Like your town either does like a Thanksgiving parade or a Christmas parade, and they go all out, and it's a huge deal. And it's an honor to be the grand marshal, whatever chick or dude is peaking in high school at that point, or, some little pageant hoe who just thinks that she's the greatest, and she's not. She's going to fall off a cliff looks wise in like 5 years, and no one's going to think she's attractive anymore. It's beside the point. All right. so many, like, marching band. You got to march in a marching band. This is the whole reason they still call it marching band now, right? Like, sure, you march when you're, playing for the halftime show of the football stadium, but you're not marching that far, right? But for the Christmas parade, man, you got to march like 2 miles. And when you're holding like a giant tuba, that sucks. It's got to suck. And so these miserable high school kids marching down the street with their tubas, playing their songs. And then, there's always like the political committees who have their dumb floats, and half of the street is like, yeah, you're awesome. And then the other half of the street is like, boo, bleh. And it's like, why do you care so much about politicians? They all suck. And then you got like little dance troops. I don't know why I'm still going on about parades. I think it's because I'm about to go see one. Because as I record this, I'm way ahead on recording, if you couldn't tell. About to go see the Christmas parade. Okay. That's all that's about. Anyway, let's talk about this elephant. All right. I also just have so much going on right now outside of this dumb little show. It's really hard to concentrate. Despite days of pouring rain in Wilmington, we're back into the story now. I just had to kind of reset my brain for a second. Despite days of pouring rain, the shows attracted about 5,000 people each. And everything went exactly as it should, except on October 9th when Topsy the Elephant got loose. Now, no one knows exactly how she got loose, though some newspapers speculated that Topsy became enraged after someone swapped a peanut for tobacco, which, again, just the kind of mean things that people used to do to elephants back then. Another source from the Associated Press claimed that while she was being loaded onto her railway car, a pack of wild dogs started barking at her and made her nervous. And then when someone fired their pistol to chase the dogs off, Topsy freaked out and bolted off the train car and actually started chasing after the dogs. Regardless of what actually happened, within seconds, Topsy was trampling neighborhood fences, smashing cars, and police, who were understandably very confused, could not understand why panicked citizens were suddenly flooding their precinct or their station with calls saying that there was an elephant in their backyard. It's Wilmington, North Carolina. There's not a zoo, and there's, obviously no wild elephants in the United States. Well, some people called the police believing that an earthquake had just occurred, only to become even more confused when they were informed that the rumbling they had just felt had actually been caused by a loose elephant. And that's got to be a weird day, right? Like, 2 things that you do not ever expect to encounter in your day-to-day life, at least in North Carolina. Now, maybe out in the West Coast where earthquakes are a little bit more common, maybe. But like, not once, and I'm pretty sure you listening to this have felt the same way. Not once have I ever woken up and been like, man, I really wouldn't be surprised to go through an earthquake or see an elephant today. Like, no. There's 2 things that just will never happen. Statistically speaking, will never happen in our lifetimes. But it did here, and people were really confused about it. Somehow, even crazier, like, no one was ever able to catch this elephant, and she just disappeared into the night. Several hours later, someone did see her and fired their shotgun at her, which only made her angrier. She eventually made her way to Eureka Dye Works, where she broke down the door, tore up the piping, and slung dye all over the walls and destroyed a delivery wagon. By morning, Topsy had made her way to a swampy area at the southern end of town between Greenfield Lake and the Cape Fear River. A group of young boys eventually found her stuck in the mucky water surrounded by cypress trees. And 2 Wilmington police officers, Leon George and Bill Walton, tried to coax her out with hay and peanuts. And I wish it was the real Bill Walton. Like, no one's gonna get the reference. But I would just love to see, there's an elephant over in the swamp. I'm gonna see if I can coax her out with a small peanut. It is quite ironic that the largest of species on our planet. It's probably not a great Bill Walton impression, but God, I miss that guy. What a crazy person he was. Anyway, by now, Topsy was so tired that it took a while for them to, kind of get her unstuck. And she was often forced to kind of use her own trunk to pull herself forward through the mud. But after knocking down a few trees, Topsy made it to the edge of the swamp and was chained to a tree while police waited for the circus handlers to arrive and take her off. The next morning, circus trainers loaded Topsy onto her train car for her short journey over to Fayetteville, where the circus was performing next. However, just as she was led up the ramp, she decided to make another break for it and ran 300 yards to a nearby dock, where she then jumped in and swam across the Cape Fear River. Now, the Cape Fear River is wide at this part, right, in Wilmington. Not in wherever it is in Wilmington. It is dozens of feet across. I don't know how deep it is, but it's, Wilmington on the coast. So I don't know how deep coastal rivers are. I don't know that they're necessarily that deep, but Cape Fear, at least at this part, is still pretty navigable by cargo ships. And so got to be deep enough, right? I don't know the rules for depths for cargo shipping and all that, but it's pretty deep and it's wide. However, despite disappearing back into the swamp, she was found the next day and coaxed back out with more hay and peanuts. So I guess it does work. At some point along the way, what's crazy about this is at some point along the way, from her jumping out, swimming across the river, and being found the next day, she had lost one of her eyes. Okay. This time, her handlers got her back out, successfully loaded her onto her train car, and reunited her with the circus, which by now had moved on from Fayetteville to Charleston, South Carolina. In the days following the incident, residents and businesses filed lawsuits to recoup the damage from Topsy's rampage, including Eureka Dye Works, who sued the circus for $5,000. Topsy actually got loose again the following year in Danville, Virginia, but remained with the circus until 1930. The circus itself continued operating until 1938. Today, there's very little evidence of Topsy's rampage through the city. Eureka Dye Works eventually closed down and was ultimately replaced by a restaurant called the Dram Yard, which opened in 2019. And they're still open, and they got some interesting stuff on there. I mean, they got an Australian Wagyu with potato pave, baby bok choy, and black garlic demi. I don't know what that means at all. Let's see, what else? Street corn vichyssoise. I have no idea if I'm saying that right. That's not a word I've ever seen before. Tuna tartare tostada. Xinjiang cumin lamb. This is way above my palate. I can tell you that right now. Shrimp and grits for $32 is highway robbery. I'm never eating here, but good on you for, whatever this place is. Anyway, moving on. Jacklyn Lucas was born on February 14th, 1928 in Plymouth. When Lucas was 10, his father, and also Jacklyn, you would think someone named Jacklyn, a woman? No, it's a dude. Dude named Jacklyn. It's spelled Jacklyn, for what it's worth. But even then, seeing that, I just thought it was still a woman, but whatever. When Lucas was 10, his father died, forcing his mother to send him to Edwards Military Institute in Salemburg. And while there, he rose to the rank of cadet captain and played every sport that he possibly could. On August 8th, 1942, he went up to Norfolk, Virginia, and enlisted in the Marine Corps, which is kind of a problem because he was only 14 at the time. But that didn't matter because Lucas told recruiters that he was 17, forged his mother's signature on the parental consent form, and then bribed a notary to push it through. And look, it's like they're getting into World War II. They need everybody at this point. So why not turn them? Why not just go ahead and bring them in? Who cares? While at his training at Parris Island, South Carolina, he then qualified as a sharpshooter. Following stops in Jacksonville, Florida, New River Air Station in Havelock, Camp Lejeune in Jacksonville, San Diego, and Pearl Harbor, Lucas eventually rose to private first class with qualifications as a heavy machine gun crewman. However, Lucas eventually got tired of all the training and instead he just really wanted to go to war. Like he's a strapping young teenager, like 16 years old, just horny for war. Just wants to get out there and shoot some Nazis and Japs. And so guess what? On January 10th, 1945, Lucas walked out of camp at Pearl Harbor and hid himself on the USS Duel, which was on its way to Iwo Jima. A month later, just before he was about to be placed on the deserter list, Lucas turned himself into Marine Captain Robert Dunlap. But rather than court-martial him, Dunlap sent Lucas to Lieutenant Colonel Daniel C. Pollock, who demoted Lucas back down to private and sent him to be part of Dunlap's C Company as a rifleman. A week later, Lucas participated in the 5th Division's invasion of Iwo Jima, so he got his wish. He's going into war. On February 20th, Lucas and 3 other Marines were slowly moving through a ravine towards a Japanese airstrip when they spotted an enemy guard post and took cover in a trench. Moments later, they spotted 11 Japanese soldiers in an adjacent trench and started shooting at them. The Japanese retaliated with their own gunfire and then also threw 2 grenades inside the trench where Lucas was. Lucas immediately spotted the grenades and pointed them out, yelled out, was like, "Yo, bruz, grenades." That's how he talked. But no one realized, he realized that no one was going to be able to get out of the way in time. So this 16, 17-year-old kid jumps over one of the Marines and stuffed a grenade into the sand with his rifle. He then grabbed the other grenade and pulled it underneath him. And although one of those grenades never detonated, the other one did explode, throwing Lucas up into the air and severely wounding his right arm, right leg, and his chest. Meanwhile, the 3 other Marines that he was with ended up killing the other 11 Japanese soldiers. USA, USA. And once the battle was over, the rest of the Marines just thought Lucas was dead and left him behind. Lucas actually was later found still alive by another passing Marine unit who had the Navy evacuate him to a beach where he was placed onto a cargo ship to be transported to the nearest hospital ship. More than a month later, Lucas arrived back in San Francisco and eventually underwent 21 different surgeries to treat his wounds. On September 18th, Lucas was discharged from the Marine Corps following the disability as a result of his wounds. And then he, along with 13 others, were awarded Medals of Honor by Harry S. Truman 3 weeks later. Lucas eventually recovered from his injuries, but lived the rest of his life with nearly 200 pieces of metal, some as big as .22 caliber bullets, which I don't know how big a .22 caliber bullet is, but a bullet is still big enough that it's crazy to think that it's just inside your body for the rest of your life. And they were permanently embedded in his body. After the war was over, dude went on to graduate with a business degree from High Point University, but he could not leave military life alone and joined the Army in 1961 as a paratrooper just to get over his fear of heights. 1961, so he's 32-ish, right around there, and he's got a fear of heights, and dude's just like, yeah, I'll just rejoin the Army, it's fine. And he goes just to be a paratrooper. He then volunteered to go serve in Vietnam, but the military denied his request, and he spent the next 4 years just training soldiers at Fort Bragg in Fayetteville. With his military career for sure over at this point, Lucas got married, had 5 children, and built a small, successful chain of butcher shops up in Maryland. However, unfortunately, problems soon began popping up. He accrued back taxes with the IRS, which then forced him to give up his disability benefits. In 1977, he learned that his second wife and son-in-law were actually plotting to kill him, but Lucas asked the court to be lenient and only give them probation for the conspiracy charge. In 1985, his home burned down, leaving him homeless and living on his meager life savings. And then a few months later, he was arrested after police found marijuana plants in the cornfield that he was camping / living in at this point. Although Maryland police wanted to charge him with unlawful manufacture and possession of controlled dangerous substances, they couldn't prove that the plants were his, and they just dropped the charges. Which, again, that's smart, right? Like, he's homeless. He's out living in this cornfield, and there's some marijuana plants that are out there, too. were they his, or did he just kind of like find him and be like, yeah, I'm going to live here. This is pretty great. Who knows? By 2000, things had improved. Lucas was invited to the christening of the USS Iwo Jima, where he placed his Medal of Honor in the ship's hull, where it remains sealed to this day. 8 years later, on June 5th, 2008, Lucas died in Hattiesburg, Mississippi of leukemia. And then in 2006, a new Arleigh Burke-class destroyer was named the USS Jack H. Lucas in his honor. But yeah, one of the craziest, bravest soldiers in World War II, Medal of Honor recipient from North Carolina. Moving on. This is a crazy story. Richard McCoy Jr. was born on December 7th, 1942 in Kinston to parents who were also first cousins because Kinston. It's an unnecessary shot at Kinston. It's just a place. I could have literally said that about any town in North Carolina because it's the South. At age 20, McCoy moved out to Provo, Utah, and enrolled at Brigham Young University, but dropped out after 2 years to serve in the Army in 1964. At that point, McCoy was sent off to Vietnam, where he served as a pilot and demolition expert and later earned a Purple Heart. Following his 2-year tour, McCoy returned to BYU in 1965 and met Karen Louise Burns. The two quickly fell in love and then got married the same year back in Raleigh. The couple went on to have 2 children, Shanti and Richard. So after settling down now, McCoy opted to serve another tour in the Army on the sole condition that they actually send him back to Vietnam, which is weird, right? Like, all you hear about, for the most part, is just like, man, I saw some stuff in Nam. I'd never want to go back. Oh, and, people just traumatized from it. And then you got McCoy here who's like, yeah, man, send me back. I want more. And he's like a weird Mormon guy too, I don't, envision like a grizzled, Mormon be like, yeah, send me back. It's probably like, yeah, friend, I would love to go back to Vietnam. I would love to go back to combat. Help the war effort, please, sir. And that's in the opposite direction of exaggeration for what most Mormon people are like. But again, it's all very contradictory. But guess what? They sent him back, and while there, he was awarded the Army Commendation Medal and Distinguished Flying Cross. He then returned to Utah, where he served as a warrant officer in the Utah National Guard. He took up skydiving and taught Sunday school at the Mormon Church while he worked to get his degree in law enforcement, with the ultimate goal of working as an FBI or CIA agent. But at some point along the way on this journey, things changed. On April 7th, 1972, McCoy boarded United Airlines Flight 855 while the plane had stopped in Denver on its way to Los Angeles. Using the alias James Johnson, McCoy took a seat and waited for the plane to take off. While in midair, McCoy signaled for a flight attendant to come over, and he informed her that he was armed with a bomb and demanded a large sum of money. In reality, McCoy had in fact been carrying a grenade and a pistol and had somehow obtained a $500,000 ransom on the plane. Somehow, I don't know. He then jumped out of the plane by parachute and escaped, where he was picked up by a passing motorist. Now, a lot of you who are into, off-color history like that, that sounds very familiar. That sounds a lot like D.B. Cooper. Well, we'll get to there in a second. 2 days later, after this stunt, McCoy was arrested while on National Guard duty while flying one of the helicopters being used to search for the guy, that hijacked the United Airlines flight in the first place. FBI agents actually used fingerprint and handwriting samples to match McCoy to the crime, and then they probably had to be like, oh man, we know exactly where he is. He's out looking for himself right now. They also searched his house and found a duffel bag containing $499,970 in cash. So he'd only spent $30 of it. Despite claiming his innocence, McCoy was found guilty of this and given a 45-year prison sentence. He was sent to the federal prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where he used his access to the prison's dental office to create a fake pistol out of dental paste. I don't know what dental paste is, but apparently it's pliable enough to make something that looks like a gun. McCoy then rounded up a gang of prisoners and escaped on August 10th, 1974, after they commandeered a garbage truck as it passed through the prison grounds. 3 months later, on November 9th, the FBI found McCoy at his home in Virginia Beach. McCoy began firing at the 3 FBI agents who fired back and killed him. In 1991, so going back to the hijacking that he did, Chief Probation Officer Bernie A. Rhodes Jr. and FBI agent Russell P. Calamay, I think that's how you say his name, published D.B. Cooper, The Real McCoy, is this book, and claimed that D.B. Cooper and Richard McCoy were the same person, especially because McCoy's 1972 hijacking of the United Airlines flight was almost exactly like the famous D.B. Cooper hijacking that had occurred the year before in 1971. McCoy's widow immediately filed a lawsuit against these authors, claiming they had misrepresented her own involvement in the hijacking, as well as conversations they had with McCoy's former attorney, Thomas S. Taylor. While the book was allowed to be published following the lawsuit, the rights to a movie version was prohibited. In all, McCoy's widow was actually awarded over $100,000 in settlements. As of right now, as far as I know, the FBI has not definitively cleared Richard McCoy as being D.B. Cooper, and attempts to make a DNA link are still ongoing. But like, how crazy would it be if D.B. Cooper was really from North Carolina? Win for us. Anyway, I don't know. Moving on now to 1970, when Gerald Hege was hired as a sheriff's deputy for Davidson County. After 3 relatively uneventful years, Hege responded to a burglary near Lexington, where he ended up shooting and killing the suspect. After getting into a fight with several inmates the following year, Hege decided to leave the force. 20 years later, in 1994, Hege decided to get back into law enforcement. It's a crazy career change. I don't know what he was doing for the previous 20 years. He was actually elected sheriff of Davidson County by 261 votes and immediately went to work changing everything. And by everything, I mean, this dude went way off the rails. He started by acting on one of his big campaign promises in which, quote, there will be no deals for anybody. And he started outfitting all of the patrol cars with a front license plate that read no deals. All deputies were ordered to dress in paramilitary fatigues and combat boots, which is definitely not what a normal sheriff's deputy wears. Sheriff's deputy just wears like a regular police uniform. At the Davidson County Jail, he reinstituted chain gang prisoner labor, removed all televisions and books except for Bibles, of course, and then he repainted the walls pink with blue weeping teddy bears. It sounds like a joke, but it's not, and it gets even weirder. Prisoners were forced to wear color-coordinated jumpsuits based on the offense they had committed. Blue for misdemeanors, green for sex offenders, I guess green light to beat them up, orange for felons. The jumpsuits were also striped like old-timey prison suits rather than the modern solid colors that everyone was used to. So like think Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Like that's what they're doing. Hege then took his own personal patrol vehicle, a 1995 Chevrolet Impala, and put a Corvette engine and nitrous oxide tanks in it, like he's in the Fast and the Furious. He then had it custom painted with a Black Widow spider and had all of the windows tinted dark black, probably past the percentage of legal tintedness or whatever, but you know, he's the sheriff, he can do whatever he wants. However, after bragging about driving the car up to 140 miles an hour around the county's roads, the department was stripped of its car insurance coverage. Good. Hege, though, he didn't care. He idolized other famous sheriffs like Buford Pusser and Joe Arpaio. Joe Arpaio being the guy out in Arizona who also is an insane person. He carried around a Heckler & Koch MP5 machine gun instead of the standard issue revolver. Dude's just running around like he's a cop in GTA. He actually kept the robes of 8 KKK members on display, claiming that he had forced them to retire. He also claimed that the mafia had put a bounty on him after he had all but stopped their drug trafficking in the county, but no one could ever verify either of those claims. All of Hege's claims and changes to the system earned him actual national fame. Court TV commissioned a television show inside Cell Block F to be filmed inside the Davidson County Jail, where the inmates served as the studio audience. It wasn't like, it's weird. It wasn't like a reality show. I think it was more like a talk show, which is weird, but like, it's also just this dude would probably just say the most outrageous stuff, and then inmates in the crowd would have to be like, we don't like that, blah, 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 whatever. I don't know. I never watched it, but it had to be entertaining. He also made additional appearances on Larry King Live 2020 and America's Most Wanted. Following the 9/11 terrorist attacks, Hege sent out a Christmas card showing him in the desert, dressed in a black jumpsuit and holding Osama bin Laden's severed head with the caption, "Happy Ramadan." He launched his own line of merchandise, which included posters, die-cast replicas of his patrol spider car, action figures of himself, and of course his own barbecue sauce. Oh, man. On September 15, 2003, Hege was charged with 15 different felonies, of course, including embezzlement, obstruction of justice, aiding and abetting, and obtaining property by false pretenses. Ironically, despite his no deals platform, he accepted a plea deal and left the force to serve just 3 years of probation. Boo. Also, probably because he would have been a dead man if they had sent him to prison. Despite being a convicted felon, Hege ran for sheriff again in 2009 and actually campaigned on a platform to restore gun rights to felons, mostly because he would not have been allowed to carry a gun even if he had won the race. Thankfully, none of it mattered as he lost his campaign by 6,000 votes. Despite a 2010 amendment to the state constitution barring convicted felons from serving as sheriff's deputies or sheriffs, Hege ran again in 2018 after he had his record expunged. He finished third in the primary voting, and by all accounts, doesn't seem like anybody's heard from him since. Although he is probably very happy with the current political climate. Our final story here is of Dwight Watson, who was born on September 28, 1952, and grew up farming in the town of Whitakers on the border of Nash and Edgecombe counties. After serving as an MP with the Army's 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, Watson returned to Whitakers to run the 1,200-acre tobacco farm that had been in his family for 5 generations. However, as federal regulations tightened on cigarettes and other tobacco products, Watson started having difficulty making a living. So, in 1999, Watson drove from Whitakers to Washington, D.C. on his tractor in protest, but then left after just driving around the city for a few hours. That's so... I don't know what he was doing. But a tractor only goes like 5-10 miles an hour, right? And to drive all the way up to D.C. from Whitakers, which is probably like a 6-hour drive in a car. So God knows how long it took this dude. He just drives around D.C. for a couple of hours and then just like, yeah, I made my point. And then he just goes home. In 2003, following a severe drought that cut his crop yield by half, Watson realized that he could no longer afford to continue running the farm and drove his tractor back up to D.C. to protest. Couldn't just like put the tractor on a trailer and then drive up there. No, he had to drive the whole tractor up to D.C. On March 17, 2003, Watson, wearing a military helmet, fastened an upside-down American flag and 2 vehicles to his tractor, not 2 vehicles to then pull his tractor, but his tractor to pull 2 vehicles. And then he drove it into a shallow pond at the Constitution Gardens near the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall. He was protesting, obviously, the cutting of federal tobacco subsidies, which he believed had directly caused the failure of his farm, as well as the government's treatment of Gulf War veterans. When D.C. police approached him, Watson claimed that he was armed with organophosphate bombs that he would detonate if the police got too close. In response, the United States Park Police blocked off the National Mall from the Lincoln Memorial all the way to the Washington Monument. Several nearby government offices were evacuated and the main streets in the area were closed off, which created a massive traffic jam across the entire D.C. metro area for 2 straight days. Meanwhile, Watson just continued driving his tractor in circles around the gardens, dug up part of an island in the pond, and then negotiated with authorities and the media on a cell phone, all while a SWAT team and 200 FBI and police officers surrounded the area. So he's basically just surrounded by all of these FBI and police officers, and he's just doing donuts on his tractor in this pond, ripping up dirt, all that kind of stuff. After 48 hours, Watson finally surrendered to federal authorities, who discovered that he didn't actually have any explosives on hand, mostly because organophosphate it sounds dangerous. It's just like bug spray, basically. He was charged with making a false threat and destroying federal property. And at his trial, he tried to represent himself, which never goes well, and attempted to subpoena Bill Clinton and Jesse Ventura, of all people, but was denied after the judge deemed his requests irrelevant to his case. During his testimony, like I said, Watson revealed that his organophosphate bombs were just 2 cans of Raid that he originally threatened to use if he didn't get any media coverage to demonstrate the harmfulness of various insecticides. To call it a bomb, like it was like a bug bomb, but like it's not like an actual bomb that's going to like blow up and hurt a bunch of people, but whatever. He was ultimately found guilty on both charges that he was given, and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, which was way higher than the minimum sentence of 16 months because Judge Thomas Penfield Jackson wanted to deter future protesters from paralyzing the entire DC area with similarly dumb demonstrations. However, based on precedent from 2004 Supreme Court ruling in Blakely v. Washington, Judge Jackson was then forced to reduce the sentence back to 16 months. Following his release, Watson returned to Whitaker's, where he found stable employment and then also became a caretaker for his mentally ill sister.
All done.
Alrighty, North Carolina Part 2 in the books. Actually, it's not Part 2, it's Part 4 in the books. Let's recap and see what we learned this week.
What did we learn?
Number 1, Topsy the Elephant, a different one, got loose and just ran amok through the Wilmington, causing a bunch of damage, lost an eye, but just kept jumping off and crossing the river, all kinds of stuff. Just a weird, fun little point in Wilmington history. Number 2, Richard McCoy Jr. could be D.B. Cooper. Like, the FBI hasn't said that he's not. And there's a ton of evidence that says, God, because he did his own hijacking and jumping out of the plane with a parachute and all of that with the ransom, $500,000, everything. Exactly like D.B. Cooper did the year before. And it's crazy that it might be him, like a dude from Kinston. Anyway, number 3, Gerald Hege. What a goober this guy is. Thank God he's not running for office anymore. But also he started in the mid 90s, and it's crazy how he just kind of flew generally under the radar. I had never heard of this guy, and he's in North Carolina doing all kinds of stuff. Granted, Davidson County is the Lexington kind of Asheboro. No, Asheboro's Randolph. Lexington County, or Lexington, North Carolina, being Davidson County. So it's a pretty populated area. But yeah, I just got his own TV show for a while, made prisoners. The one that killed me the most was he painted the prison walls pink with blue weeping bears. This guy's an insane person who hates criminals, but then also was a criminal. 15 felonies, had his gun rights taken away, which was probably good because he walked around with a submachine gun anyway. Anyway, dude was crazy. And then, yeah. Was that number 3? That was number 3. All right, let's get out of here.
What did we learn?
Next week on Our Weird World, we are into the month of March, and it is Weird Fun Bag number 24, looking at the stories of Baron George von Bothmer, the London beer flood, and the Southcottian movement / cult. But they were dummies. They're weird. There's a whole big, like, what's in the box kind of thing. All kinds of stuff. You'll see next week. It's a silly story. But that's it. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends. And keep it weird.
This is a podcast